It's 420. Everybody take a hit. Hey folks, welcome. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get out of some windows here.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hi.
there you are. So, yeah, today is, I'm just pulling out my little outline here because I need that. Today's Zoom session is going to be one of these where we talk about like the therapeutic stuff, how we can uh, address the mental health issues that we have, because a lot of us as patients, we have our physical issues that we're dealing with, illness, disease, injury, and whatnot. And usually what comes hand in hand with those types, especially prolonged illness, is mental health issues. They're two peas in a pod. And oftentimes we aren't equipped necessarily with the tools to best integrate and approach this in the most healthy way. Especially in nowadays, so many people are having mental health issues, and there's just not enough mental health providers available to do that. And, it's something that at the VA we've been dealing with for a while now, and now the general population is now that we've gone through a big mass trauma event, PTSD is become a common thing, and there's a shortage of mental health providers out there. So we wanted to talk about, Val and I, we've been talking back and forth. These are some things that at TRUCE, we talked about, integrating mental health with our holistic approach to cannabis use. Because we all know cannabis, it's not a panacea. It doesn't fix everything, no matter how hard we want it to be. That's just the truth, but it does help. And so when we can integrate other tools and treatment options, we can get better results for what we're looking for. Is there anything you want to add, Val?
Um, I mean, honestly, I would only say that a lot of the times we only focus on mental health when it's not good. But mental health is always and continuously a struggle, but also a gift, right?
Yeah.
So I like to think of it as mental wellness overall, to really kind of hone in on why we wanted to bring it to the cannabis space is a lot of people forget that cannabis can be a great tool to mental wellness and how we maintain and sustain that
Hmm.
over time, rather than thinking, oh, I need to go out and get treatment because I'm not doing well. I think we hope to kind of encourage people to think about their mental wellness throughout the whole, their whole journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all.
Here, let me go back to the slides that we made. So yeah, it's all about integrating, and so we're going to be talking about some of the tools that I've used that help me. Um, and we're going to start off with a quote. I'm going to quote myself, but this is something that I've talked quite a bit on previous podcasts. But emotions are a lot like demons or the mythical creatures of folklore. Once you can name them, you have power over them. And that is, once you understand the concept of what that's trying to say, it's one of these breakthrough moments in therapy. And so we're going to be talking about understand emotions, myth, folklore, and reality, learning to name emotions, misconceptions about emotions, and the impact emotions have in our lives. And so to start off with, you guys saw in the post announcing this week's Zoom sesh, what the emotion and feeling wheel is. And I've actually created, or I've imported this. So you can just Google emotion and feeling wheel, and there will hundreds of variations of these will pop up, and find whichever one you like. I like this one because it's really descriptive in the words, and I also like the blending of the colors. I think my OCD side of me really appreciates a good color wheel. But if you look, so what this is, it breaks our emotions down into the cores. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm surprised. But usually that's just a very basic core of the feeling that you're feeling. And so what we're trying to do is peel below what's beneath that anger, what's beneath that fear. It's an insecurity. Okay, well, with this insecurity, is it inferiority or is it inadequacy? Learn to break down, because once you can name it, usually you can trace to the trigger. And so we're going to talk about that. But these are just different variations. I like this one. I always like a good watercolor, arts and craft look, but find which one works for you. So just Google emotion wheel and you'll find one. But I've had one of these on my fridge for the last few years, since I was introduced to this tool up at the VA. So what is the
Drew,
emotion? Yeah, go ahead, Val.
we do a little thought experiment
Yeah.
with people just to see. So I'd like everyone to think about like what feelings you felt today and count them. And maybe throw in the chat, for those of you that can, how many emotions you're actually able to name without looking at the wheel. Or if you even want to say it real, I think there's only a few of us that have access to kind of speaking directly, but I'd be interested to see how many emotions people felt today.
I know I've felt quite a few.
We'll
Yeah,
name them. What'd you say?
I just said a lot and I forgot I was on mute.
Well, it's really interesting. So Brene Brown is obviously a very well-known, researcher that has studied emotions and vulnerability and kind of how we do that. And similar to what Drew's going to share, there's an array of emotions, but most people can only name 3. And that's our standard base for actually communicating how we feel. There's sadness, anger, fear, love, happiness. That's basically it. So I love that Drew brought this up. So I want you to, as he's talking, kind of consider, maybe today you said, oh, I feel a lot of emotions. Maybe there were only 5. And looking at this will, seeing how many of those actually can break down, and how he kind of walks you through breaking those out. And it's a beautiful exploration of like how you actually feel, not the base of the 3 emotions or 5 emotions we as humans actually use.
Well, and also the really cool concept is we're not, once you're able to identify emotions, you realize that it's a spectrum of emotions you're feeling. You could be feeling love, anger, sadness, surprise, and joy at different variations of different concoctions, and being
Just
able
like
to what was that?
They just like that too. Like emotions can change so quickly that sometimes you don't even know how to handle your own emotions because sometimes it's just a little overwhelming. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, Drew.
No, you're fine.
No,
Yeah,
that's
they are overwhelming, especially when they're controlling you and you're not controlling them. And as someone who's been dealing with PTSD now for well over a decade, I understand the different states of when I'm being controlled by the emotions, when I'm being controlled by the chemicals and the trauma, and when I have control of it. And it's it's major variations of physiology on your body. When you're in control of your emotions, you're most likely your sympathetic nervous system is on a stand down, so you're not in fight or flight. But when they're controlling you, oh boy, you could take on an army if you need to. It feels like sometimes, and so these are tools that the VA has given us. So we're going to explore the different emotions and the feelings and the tips for using the wheel effectively. And again, I love the analogy of the hero's journey. It's a concept that I find fascination in, because it's so integral into all of our storytelling throughout all of humanity's history. And usually in a lot of these stories, whether it's TV, film, Star Wars, a lot of the characters are usually personified emotions. And so, when I gave the analogy of attributing our emotions to like the stories and characters from folklore and from our stories, again, if you can name it, you have power over it. And so we'll come back to this. So the emotion wheel and feeling wheel, it's a tool that helps you put to words, because when you're really feeling your feels, it's sometimes hard to identify it. So I'll go through a generic example for a veteran. So say I'm wanting to go out. Well, I have anxiety to go out, to go somewhere where I'm going. Well, so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to sit with myself. What is it that I'm feeling? Why am I, is it this fear? Okay. Well, is it a nervousness? No, it's not horror, not insecure, and so you work it, and maybe it's not fear. Maybe it might be in the anger category. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit ragey, or so again, being able to just sit with that, and we're using mindfulness techniques, again, just sitting, taking inventory. What am I feeling? What am I feeling? Oh, wait, it's actually sadness. Okay. Am I disappointed? Am I suffering? Okay, and maybe it's hurt, maybe it's anger. And see, once you can identify it, so it's depressed. My sadness is depressed. So what is causing that depression? So once you can name it, you can then go back and start working on, okay, I can identify it. I'm going to take note. And then, little by little, and then again, like I said, it's usually not one emotion that you're feeling. I'm sure many of you have seen the Disney Pixar film Inside Out, which I think should be required viewing for anybody going through high school. It should be public education requirement, because it's so important to let yourself feel. That's the other big part. Letting yourself feel the emotions, all of them, the full spectrum. One of the problems that I had when I was going through the pharmaceutical portion of trying to take care of my PTSD and my depression was the VA put me on. I was on 28 pills a day. The SSRIs, it got the benzos, so the Valiums and the all that fun stuff that just numbs you up. And what it does is it numbs you. It's great for a short term, but that's not a state that you can do any healing from, because you're only working from one or two of the color palettes when you need the full spectrum. So like the movie Inside Out goes, they lost a couple of the emotions. They escaped, and the chaos that pursued, because what are we going to do? We're no longer operating without happiness, and and anger is taking over, and it gets that imbalance, and then by the end you realize how important each one of these emotions play. And another really important thing, and I think culturally here in Utah, especially, but being okay with not assigning rightness or wrongness, I guess is the right way, to what you're feeling. I know so many times we're taught, even your thoughts you're being judged, and religious philosophical differences aside, assigning wrongness to emotions, especially when so many times we're also dealing with chemical imbalances here, it's not necessary. And so being able to free yourself of assigning a rightness or a wrongness to emotion and allowing yourself to just feel, like, those are so key into healing. Because if you're trying to heal with only half of your palate and beating yourself up because, oh, I had that intrusive thought again, or, oh, I'm beating myself up again, and Heavenly Father doesn't like it when I'm beating myself up. Well, you're right, and now you're getting stuck in that intrusive thought. But if you could just be like, it's okay to have that thought. I like the visualizations. Again, these are mindfulness tools, but imagine yourself floating on a river, and there's little leaves and sticks and stuff floating by. And that intrusive thought is sometimes just a leaf that comes and just hits you on the side of the head. It's so annoying, so irritating. But once you just let it go, let it flow back on the river, just go on drifting by. And once you're able to release it, you realize they're not paying attention to it anymore, and it goes on. And it's the same thing with emotions, just identifying it, not putting any wrongness or rightness to it. I'm suffering. I'm also exhausted. I'm nervous. I'm longing. I'm dismayed. I'm also happy. And just, yeah. Val, do you have anything to hop in
Well,
on?
I wanted to ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I think you started to kind of touch on this, and I think that it's an important factor of kind of leaning into actually creating vulnerability and emotional mastery. But as a veteran, as well as a male who grew up here and in American culture, emotions are not a thing that is usually welcome or promoted as something you should be sharing. What do you think it was that changed for you, or that you were able to focus on, that allowed for you to feel more comfortable being open about your emotions? And is there anything you would recommend that people can maybe start to kind of practice in order to do that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a multi-step process. Cannabis definitely was a big tool in helping me come into an awareness of one, just of the full spectrum of emotions beyond just the core 5 or 6 that we know of. And I think part of that is due to kind of the dissociative properties of medical cannabis. And also, I'm open about it. I've also done rituals with ayahuasca and LSD. And all of those have contributed to amazing spiritual and energetically healing experiences for me, that brought us an awareness that was not there prior to consuming. And so, excuse me. So I think a lot of that is due to the dissociative properties of medical cannabis, and the plant medicines that help someone with PTSD and trauma by providing a temporary detachment from their emotional response. So it one allows you to relax. First of all, that's one of the most important properties of cannabis, is just that, oh, okay, I can breathe. And kind of the disassociation of, I like to refer to it as having an upper view. Like, you get to pull back and just like kind of look down. It's like, okay, I have a better perspective of my full, what's going on here, what I'm feeling. It allows me to be like, oh, what is this tension also in my shoulder, and my hip? Why am I storing all that tension in my hip? And when you're able to disassociate and pull back, you're like, oh, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And that's when we talk about doing it, integrating and doing a full holistic approach, we got the cannabis, we got the mindfulness, we've got the dissociatives, and now we have the tools like an emotion and feeling wheel that I can sit with and give name to it. back to your other part of your question, so yeah, I cannabis and that helped. The other part of it was honestly, don't ask, don't tell ending. Prior to that, I was out with a lot of my friends and close family members, but because of federal law, I had to be in the closet. And so that required a lot of code switching.
Okay.
And when I was, or masking, whichever metaphor we want to use, but when I was being all straight and butch and so I'm talking about shit and stuff, and when I was being part of that was masking, turning down my emotional response by like 90%. And it's kind of funny that I guess my stereotype of a straight guy is only running on 10% of your emotions, and hiding the rest, but the shoe fits. And I think that's a lot of the problem of culturally, what, especially here in America, is, growing up, especially, I was born in '80, so I raised in the '80s, grew up in the '90s. I can't tell you how many times I was called a fag or gay because you expressed emotion. And so many people are taught, well, I'm not going to express that emotion then if people think that that's what I am because of that, well, I was gay. But so many other people develop an anxiety of emotional expression as a reflection of sexuality, which is just it's stupid, it's ridiculous, that they then grow up only shoving all those emotions and only reflecting 10, 15, 20% of their full emotional spectrum. And that leads, again, my personal opinion, that leads to dysfunction, emotional dysfunction. And I think we're seeing that in widespread display in our culture. And I'm not, this has nothing to do with partisan politics. It's everywhere. But I think that's why I guess I'm passionate about this subject, because I think if we can be okay with the emotions, give name to them, and not realize that, or be okay with well, this whole side of the color spectrum of emotions is gay, so I'm only going to express this side of the emotions because that's a straight masculine alpha male side of the spectrum. No, the whole thing is your emotional spectrum, and it's okay to use the whole palette. So but yeah, kind of going back to it, I think the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell was really a transition point when I was able to really allow myself the full palette emotions to exist in. So
yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Drew. I think that's one of the things we, unfortunately, as a whole culture have been taught, is that emotions are have a gender base of existence, whereas that is the most genderless part of existing. Emotions are for all humans. No matter your gender, you feel deeply. It's actually, does culture allow for you to express it in a way that feels compatible with what you'd like to express it in? And so I think that that's a really wonderful part of what you touched on. We all know that for like cannabis creates that balance within our bodies, and a lot of what you talked about is our somatic system, which is our nervous system, which associates to a lot of what we see for patients who struggle with fibromyalgia or anxiety disorders or PTSD or chronic pain. And I mean, there's just a host of you know conditions on our list in our state specifically that are vastly associated with not only your physical experiencing, but how you express emotion and how you feel open to be in the world. And so I really appreciate you connecting those two sides of it, because it's not like being cut off from and or seen or treated in a certain way because of your gender, that you don't have emotions or that you shouldn't feel, has also been something that keeps people from getting certain treatments for
Yeah.
certain conditions, and they don't feel comfortable sharing as patients their wealth or depth of emotion. And it also numbs their somatic experiencing in their body, to where you don't really catch a lot of the things that could be really useful as you're going on your journey with cannabis. So I love that you kind of brought this to the table in the way that you did, because sometimes we have a disconnect in how all of this fits together. So yeah, thank you, Drew. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing so vulnerably.
So we're gonna go on to the next part of this, and some might be afraid of this word, SEL. It's been politicized, and again, none of this is politicized. There's no this is a no politics zone. We're all smoking weed. We're all cool. So trust me when I say it's okay to let your shields come down while we talk about this. But social emotional learning skills, a path to emotional well-being. I was taught these skills at the VA, and when we're talking about social emotional learning skills, what we're doing is being equipped with the tools. Again, the emotion wheel is part of social emotional learning. You know, oh, now I can name these emotions. Now I know what it is. Now that beforehand you didn't know. You knew the 5 emotions, maybe 3 or 4. Now you have a whole spectrum of emotion. Like, you are now consciously more developed than you were beforehand, because you're now equipped with more knowledge on how to handle your emotions, how to throttle your emotions. You know, a lot of people have, especially veterans, I've noticed, will have throttling issues. They'll go from 0 to 100 in like 0.2 seconds, and there's no like in between. There's no middle ground. There's no like emotional foreplay. It's like I'm okay to I was raging mad. Whoa, throttle down. You know, and learning that, you know, there's a whole spectrum of in between. And when you go from 0 to 100, there's nothing after 100. Like 100's being full throttle. There's nothing after that. Like, where do you go after that? Like, that's a boring conversation. So, you know, give it 10%. You know, and if they're getting you angry, give them another, rev the engine a little bit more, but throttle it. Like, and learning to throttle these emotions and being like, hey, I'm really raging, but I want to punch this wall. But I also realize that I'm going to probably have to pay $100 to fix that wall afterwards. So maybe I'm not as mad as I really want to be and punch this wall. Maybe I'll just be like, oh gosh darn it. And that's good enough. And look, you don't have to replace the wall. Like, learning these tools to wind you back down. It's so essential.
Drew, I'm going to add that just so that it's not in the context of just veterans, but I also think this is a learned skill that if you see that reflected as a child or in your home, and that is normal, that you are actually never taught not to throttle that way. So it's actually a baseline human characteristic for a lot of people too, to go from 0 to 100 in all their emotions, right?
Yeah.
And that's the unlearning. That's the social emotional learning that you're kind of talking about, which is like, we all could use a little bit of this right now, especially based on kind of what has been going on. So
right. Yeah.
I
like,
love that you're bringing it up that way.
Yeah. And being able to flash, consequences. So we got a couple hands. Zach, we'll go to you.
What's up, guys?
Hey.
Hi, Zach.
What you were saying, and was thinking about my own life and how psychedelic integration has really transformed my PTSD, my depression, my overall health. And I think that being aware that you're your own first responder, and if you're in a bad situation, to do breath work, to do these different techniques, try some cannabis, try whatever, like find what your balance is, and realize that everybody is hurt, everybody's struggling. And just because you're having your PTSD, everybody else is probably going through the same thing. They just don't necessarily manifest it. So just do your best to work past your difficult times and realize that you're experiencing something, and don't run away from that. That's what I struggled with when I'd go to alcohol, is that it would try to numb what I was experiencing and it wouldn't take away the problem. And I think that's what psychedelics do, is they allow you to see your situation and shake up the snow globe per se. And I love what you guys are saying. I just wanted to chime in with my experience and how I'm still working on it, but I'm so much further than I was 6 years ago before I overcame alcohol and found psychedelics and mushrooms and cannabis. And yeah, it's just about community. So thanks, guys.
It is. Thank you for sharing.
Yay. Congrats, Zach. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and it is you know, and he said a very important thing. None of us are perfect. You know, I have to constantly remind myself, and you know, I have bad days, I have bad weeks, I have bad months, and I have good days. And you know, when I'm able to practice self-care, I'm able to have a quicker rebound from the bad days and dig myself out. So again, I know a lot of advocates are afraid to share their story or get out there because they're like, well, I'm still messing up. You know, I'm an addict still. I'm this. We're all fallen. No one's perfect, and if someone is saying they are, they're pretending. And being okay with that. Again, forgiveness, forgiving yourself, giving yourself grace. It's so important in the healing process, because when you don't give yourself that grace, you're not in a healing state. You're in a condemning, damaging state. You're self-inflicting wounds, and you can't be in a state of healing where you're like, oh, I'm wicked, I'm not worthy, or I'm bad, or this, like that's not a state of healing. Like, and again, sometimes you have to like convince yourself of this. Mantras are a great tool to, you know, look yourself in the mirror and say, you know, I am loved, I am worthy, I am beautiful, I am fucking amazing, you know, and you have to tell yourself that enough until you believe it. Alicia, you gotta.
Just to add real quick, Drew, I feel like that's the most beautiful part of what Zach mentioned is we all have to remember this is forever. So there, like, as much as we are looking for a point in which we are healed, I think that's one of the things, as somebody who even does this work, I'm struggling through right now, is you're not broken. As much as the world wants you to think you're broken, no, you're just a human having a human experience in another bag of bones that hopefully you are taking care of, and that you're trying to learn each piece of that bag so that you can fill it with things you love and things that feel aligned with you. And I think that that is a hard thing to do right now, in the state of how the world is going. And also, you know, you get into our experience as patients here with cannabis, and also with other psychedelics, when you're fighting for access to things that you know could potentially change your life and change your brain and change your heart and your nervous system. It's a very hard fight to believe that it's worth it. And so that's kind of what I love that you're talking about and touching on, is like, it's that little bit of awareness, that little bit of affirmation, finding your community when you can, voicing when you need that community, and really leaning into tools that you find work for you, even if culturally, you know, and that's what I love about Zach really sharing his experience, is we have a culture that doesn't always lean to that feeling okay. And he really speaks a lot about how he has had to work through areas that didn't feel very comfortable based on the way other people were talking about whether he should be doing it or not. And he kept fighting for that and moving through it. And I think that's what we all have to keep doing. So it's like, just start scratching the surface, you know, and then let that wound open, and be proud of it, and keep pushing through it, you know.
Yeah.
But Alicia, let's hear from you.
Well, and that's actually what you were just saying is a really, really good way to just like radiate confidence about what it is that you're doing for yourself. And then you tend to, like, people around you tend to see that, and they tend to kind of accept it. That's what happened for me, like with my family. You know, they all kind of know that I've always been a cannabis user, and most of them are LDS. Some of them are super strict Catholics. Like, but everybody nowadays realizes that it's a benefit instead of just something stupid that like I'm not a teenager anymore, guys, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but going back to learning skills on how to deal with your emotions and your feelings in the moment, and how you can go from 0 to 100. I think it's important to learn these skills in order to help you communicate so that you don't go from 0 to 100. And me, myself, I mean, we're all human, right? Like you were saying, it's like, it's a learned thing that you learn as you live and you go and you meet new people and you come across new situations and emotions come along, especially when like from 0 to 100, you know?
Yeah.
And so learning these skills is very important. I've had to do the thing with myself. So, you know,
No,
cannabis, because it does help you calm down enough to be able to just actually think, you know, in a good, positive instead of a negative way, which is real good.
It is.
I love that you said that, Alicia. Honestly, I feel like my therapist helped me understand that I needed to stop screaming my feelings at people, because people are not going to actually want to hear what you're saying when you're screaming the things at them, right? And that's a constant practice, a constant reminder, because for me, that was the way that things felt normal, was like whoever's screaming the loudest is the one who wins. And moving through your life in that manner sets yourself up for a feeling of not feeling validated and or looking for validation where there won't be any, because you were the angry person in the room, right? So, and that person, nobody remembers what triggered that person to be angry, right? Nobody's going to focus on the reason that person responded that way, because that's not how our society works. So it's kind of
basically
what?
You have to save yourself in situations.
Exactly. Yeah. Be your own life raft. And that means for your own mental health, right? Like you have to be your own life raft.
Yep.
So thanks for bringing that up. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question, Alicia?
Sure.
When it came to kind of working through your emotional experience with your family and not really accepting cannabis, were there any tools you found to be helpful that you might be open to sharing for people who might be in a similar situation?
I think that for many, many years, I just kind of hid everything. And like my grandmother and people closest to me kind of knew what I was doing. They weren't for sure, and I wasn't fully open about things. You know, I think we all had that. If you were a cannabis user when you were younger. But once cannabis came to Utah and, you know, it was proven, you know, that it actually is a good thing and people were actually seeing it help people. I think at that point, it was when I decided that it was okay to just be open and be myself and be real, and whether they wanted to love me or not, it was up to them. But if I was supporting something that was positive and was helping people, then my family should support that. And I think I just got lucky that they actually were cool, you know?
Well, good.
Cool.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know if I question.
You did. Yeah, that was beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
Of course.
And a supportive family is also really important. But she also, at least you in some of the words you used, the word compartmentalization came to mind. And that also brought me back to, again, talking emotional health and how we're brought up. You know, I'm a 6th generation Mormon. My mom's family is from you know, Europe, Sweden area. My dad's family is from Welsh. You know, that British. You know, we're all of and biologically I'm Irish. You know, and we're all taught to, you know, if you have an uncomfortable emotion, and again, this is really prevalent in the LDS culture, you know, pack it away neatly in a little box, lock it up, and put it away.
Yep.
You don't have to deal with it.
So I
yeah.
fit you. So I get that on my side.
Yeah. But here's the lie about that. Once I lock it up, I won't have to deal with it. You will. It'll all
Yeah.
come tumbling down at one point.
And then,
All of those little locked up boxes at once will spring open when the least convenient time. And so being aware of the cultural and emotional generational trauma, and techniques that we've been passed on 5 generations, 6 generations, and now, we hear a lot about, the millennials and Gen X and Gen Z and Gen Alpha being the generation of breaking generational trauma, stopping the trauma from passing on, and breaking it, saying, no, we're done with this. That we recognize what that is. We can identify it. It's like the same, one of the reasons why we teach children comprehensive sexual education, so children are equipped with the knowledge to identify it when abuse, if they don't know what it is, you can't identify it. But if they're educated, no, no.
Yeah.
And so the compartmentalization, and again, this is from the book of Drew, so I'm not sure, there's probably are a lot of medical studies, I just have not studied it. But I am of the firm belief that all of that packed away trauma, all of those little locked boxes of emotion, those go places in your body. You store them. You hear a lot of people that have hip problems. You store trauma in your hips. And you develop arthritis and inflammation, whatnot. I also believe emotions that you keep locked up, that is a good representation that it turns into cancers. Val?
I agree.
So that's actually been proven.
Okay.
So what you're saying is a beautiful book of Drew that is also a wonderful book of research, that we're actually starting to put together. So we now know that our gut biome, that is dramatically has a huge effect on our brain and how we actually process and map our mental health. It also, we are now realizing and kind of putting into context just how big of an effect not moving through your emotions has on general overall health and well-being on a cellular structure. So it really is very, very important. And Dr. Gabor Mate is a wonderful proponent of sharing a lot of information about what it means to truly move through and pass through your emotions. The Body Keeps the Score is a wonderful book about literally how our trauma is stored, not just from our own selves, but through the umbilical cord and through what is passed to us from our mothers. We can see genetic mutations that occur due to trauma being passed on through generations. So when we're looking at a lot of birthing and doula aspects now that kind of say, the way that you treat your body and the way that you treat yourself as you are about to have a child actually can heal 7 generations of trauma, by you taking the action and taking the time to create a better mental health place for yourself. You are passing that on whether you want to or not, genetically. So it's as much as we want to say, like, it feels that way, it's literally the book of Drew is a true statement. So thank you.
And Ken, just about what you just said, like I can feel it. And when you're super passionate about something, or like you've been raised like we have, Drew, and you find that moment where you actually recognize that a lot of the way that you were raised was probably not the right way, and then you try to find people to blame, and then you recognize that you can't blame anybody because they didn't even know better themselves, especially
Exactly.
it's been passed down from 5 generations, 6 generations. So it's one of those things, like that feeling that you get when you finally recognize it and you actually can talk about your feelings. Like, I'm getting the chills, I'm almost crying. I'm emotional because it's a big deal.
It is.
So like getting past that is the most amazing feeling. And so because of these things, and I have a daughter and a son who they have not been baptized. They haven't been blessed. They're not religious. I have not chosen to be that way with them. I raised them spiritually, and my family has loved me anyway. But to be able to make different choices and break the cycle of teaching our boys that they have to be strong and tough and they can't show their emotions, and then eventually they grow up and they find women that want to love them, but they don't know how to open up emotionally, and it just goes to shit. And then their whole it's a process, and it just keeps going and going. And I don't want that for my son. So
No.
I have chosen to be real tough and strong and break the cycle, man. So I fight with my daughter all the time. Like, you be nicer to him. He can be that way. It's okay for him to feel his emotions. Let him be himself. Like, I'm always constantly reminding, and because I catch myself too. It's a cycle that's hard to break, but I'm doing it.
It is. And once you're able to identify it and recognize it, it's easier to, I'm repeating that cycle again, getting back into that pattern again. And again, being okay with that. And another important thing that you said, my family is really important to me. I may not be active LDS anymore. I'm gay. I was exiled from the community that I was born and raised in, but it's still my family. It's still my heritage. It's still my culture. And I think it's important that as we're breaking some of the generational trauma, that doesn't mean we're also denigrating our origin stories, where we come from, our families. Personally for me, I've developed more of an Eastern philosophy mingled with my Mormonism upbringing. I believe more in reincarnation. And so I believe, that we're family groups on this continual cycle and journey. And, we can honor our heritage while also breaking the things that need to be broken and becoming better. Like, imagine Mormonism without the generational trauma. Like, that's heaven. That those so we could be so much better of a culture, of a people, if let's heal the things that need to be healed and accept that that was back then, this is now, and there's a future, and we're going to be so much even better now that we've released ourselves from and again, not identifying wrongness with it, realizing that's where we all were at that point in that time, and we've progressed and evolved and become better, and finding a way to resolve. I know I'm still working on that, because again, there's still a lot of trauma between me and the church that I was raised in for being who I am, but being able to also separate that and my 7 generations of Howells, Nelson, Reese pioneer heritage, and honoring that as well as that's my foundation of where I am today. I think it's, anyways, sidetrack.
Not sidetrack at all, Drew. I think that what you're saying is almost imperative in order for people to begin to work through their own emotional acuity. If you can't look at where you came from and look at the impacts, which we always say right or wrong, but it's really not, it's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. We were raised by people who also didn't know and felt just like us, right? So there's a point where you have to start accepting that, your lineage is your lineage because these people lived and they tried, and that's really it, right? And the sooner that you kind of start to process that and start to move away from attaching good or bad, negative, positive, and understanding this just is, which literally that's what I talked about in therapy today. Like, the world just is what it is, not in a bad way, but in the way that I get to be in it. Alicia, I love what you said, because I tell my sisters and my cousins and my friends that I just so appreciate watching them as mothers and as fathers, because they're doing things in a way that is so different than what happened to them. And that's what my parents did. That's what your parents did. That's what their parents did, because that's what generational change is. That's evolution at its finest and most beautiful, right? Is having that awareness, and then also fighting the fight to catch yourself each time when you maybe aren't showing up in the way you want, but in the back of your head, oh, this is what I felt. And so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to try to do it differently, Or you do it and then you say, I'm so sorry I did that. Please don't hold on to this. I don't want this to be the way that
Yeah,
you
I don't.
experience me as a parent. This is me and my feels. Let's talk about feels, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, like I truly think that as a populace of people who are awake and conscious and living in this world right now, that's the thing that we're here for. That's the bridge of what our generation gets to do, you know.
Yeah, right.
It's
Love.
our responsibility.
It's very important to like just accept everybody for who they are and love unconditionally with boundaries, but to love unconditionally to
And
anybody you come across. That's how we're going to fix things. And
Yeah.
every
yes,
different, earlier you were talking about, Drew, I don't even remember exactly the wording that you used, but it really had a big different, like all these different aspects came into mind. Racism, politics, all these things. If people could just love, if everybody could just love and let go of all the bullshit from the past and everything, all the bad decisions people made in our past generations and all that crap, if we could all just do that and then come together and just love each other, imagine what the world would be.
Exactly.
I always try to remember Brene Brown. Brene Brown says, we're all just doing the best we can. And if you try to remember that and like move with that in the back of your mind, that allows for you to meet people more at a place where they're at rather than where you would love for a people to be. But that's a hard thing to do and it's a practice, right? So having that like awareness and self-management and relationship skill and
Yeah.
decision making, you know, that's the application of it.
But if you feel it in your heart and in your soul that the way that you're living, the things that you're doing is making a difference for you and the people that you love and for the world, then keep doing it. To whoever's watching, keep doing that. That's how we're going to do it. Keep doing that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, what we're talking, these are social emotional learning skills. You know, they bring awareness, this again, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decisions, skill makings. And it's essential for medical cannabis patients because you can reach whole new levels of healing when you step into this awareness. And there's tools that we can use to develop our social emotional learning skills. It's like a gym. It's like a muscle. You know, you have to exercise it. And if you know, I love Amazon. I love how convenient it is that I order stuff and it shows up at my door sometimes the very same day. But there are tons of tools. If you just search social emotional learning tools, all these resources that they have flashcards that bring you through thought exercises. Valerie talked about thought exercises or mental exercises earlier. And this is such a huge tool for me. But I realize some people may not know how to do this. But so, you know, it's a process of purposely exploring scenarios, situations, or problems mentally to understand complex concepts, consider potential outcomes, and develop new insights or solutions. It's a power cognitive tool that can harness effectively in personal development, psychology, emotional growth, especially combined with medical cannabis therapy. So, you know, what is a thought exercise? You know, for a really lazy person, put in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and pick a character, and you follow that character through their whole entire emotional journey as if you were them. What is it like to be Sam through the whole entire journey? You know, the emotion where he sees Frodo rowing away by himself in the boat, you know, the feeling of that you are failing, you know, experience those emotions. Let yourself feel, let yourself cry. Let yourself get angry. Be Sam for the next 6 hours as you experience it. That's a thought exercise. And then when you're finished with the trilogy, you have cognitively gone through the process of what he's gone through and gone through the emotional journey. And again, it's like an exercise. It's like going to the gym. It's like running a marathon. Your brain muscle, your emotional, the part that is you is now stronger because you've now gone through that. And you've also like, well, these are things I may not want to do. Now go back and rewatch the whole Lord of the Rings as another character. That's a lazy man's version of a thought exercise, but it works just the same. Allowing yourself to go through these emotional roller coasters and then sitting with it afterwards. How did that make me feel? How did that make me feel when I, as this character, betrayed somebody who I deeply loved and cared about? Now, if I'm in a situation in my life, would I want to do that with somebody that I care about and deeply love? No. And look, you've now gone through that without actually having to do it in real life. You used the book, the allegory, the story of whatever story you're watching to go through it and be like, I don't think I want to be the type of person that does that. And you are now much more of a better person. And again, you didn't have to experience it in real life. Like these are thought exercises. These are cognitive exercises. And now you've gone through that emotional, you're more developed. Alicia, you got your hand up.
Sorry, I got to say something else. Okay. So you got me again. See, Drew. Okay. So emotions, it's all the topic, man. So emotions. Okay. I've had a lot of deaths recently, grandparents, and I don't know if anybody else knows, but when grandparents die, sometimes you end up with all their stuff, right? Mm-hmm. All their furniture, all the pretties, and I had to be real selective, but man, it's hard for me because I love my grandparents. Okay. So my house is full of stuff. Okay. I'm feeling like a hoarder right now. It's not that bad, guys, because I'm a clean person, just I have too much stuff in my house. But like I've been fighting this whole, I got to get rid of some things. So get this. So you bring up the whole watching something on Netflix or whatever to try to find your emotional space. I found my emotional space yesterday on Hoarders. Okay. I did, because this lady had lost her mom and she had ended up with all her stuff. And then this house it was bad, but hers was real bad. And I'm thinking, and I watched her go through this therapy process of going through the house and the whole deal. And I was like, today, I'm like, all right, get rid of some shit. Let's do this. Like, I was so okay with it because it's like, technically, it's really like, it's okay to have specific memories, but you don't need everything.
Yeah.
And it literally helped me through it. That was like therapy. Hoarders therapy. They gave me therapy. I learned from hoarders. I just thought it was funny. That's why I was giggling a little bit like, oh my God.
It was so true.
Ripping up drapes to use with my art projects. And like, I'm so excited because now I feel comfortable being able to, and some of the stuff is going to the festival that we're going to do. So I have all these pretty things. I get to just let them go and I'm happy about it. And I wouldn't have done that before. So thank you, hoarders. And thank you guys thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They say that your space is a manifestation of how you feel internally. And that's been something that has resonated over and over and rang true in my brain and in my heart, but also in my house. And so it's one of those things that is at the top of everybody's list of like, I gotta get rid of things. But it does take time and it takes a lot of emotional push to release yourself from holding on to the items or to the memory of that item. So I think that's a great point, Alicia. I think we do that not just with our like loved ones things, but also with our own things that elicit experiences or life remembering, so
clothing.
Yeah.
From our childhood now to 5, you know what I mean? It's eventually you got to either pass it on or let it go. You can't keep it all, So it's emotional, man. When you're a parent, it really is. It's a big deal. Or when you've lost somebody or anything, that has a lot to do with why people struggle with emotions. It's just another thing that you got to be able to heal from and move forward from. So I thought I wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Yeah, that is.
Thank you.
That is really, and also I know for me as an ADHD person, I have piles. I have my piles, and again, being okay with that, and recognizing its source and that it's not a personality flaw. But again, having these thought exercises again from hoarders or watching Lord of the Rings or watching Star Trek or whatever it may be, these thought exercises it enhances self-awareness, it improves your emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and problem solving, and also the big thing, it increases your empathy. learning how to empathize along with the character as an exercise prepares you to learn how to empathize with other people in real life. It's like, it was brought up earlier, Zach brought it up and Alicia brought it up. We've all brought it up. You don't ever know what other people are going through. Their life is just as fucked up as yours, maybe different, entirely different in different ways. And they're probably shown it different ways. But when you learn how to use empathy, you are able to see the person before you as they are, and understand, oh, they're broken just like me. They don't need a fuck you, they need a hug, or whatever it may be. Learning empathy has always been a big thing for me, and I have a hard time because I've realized, there's a few things that I've realized. Not everyone has the same kind of empathy that I do. Some people don't have it at all. They don't know how. And, then you have your sociopaths. That's the other full side of the spectrum. But not everyone has been equipped or unlocked these parts of their emotional intelligence toolbox. My other thought is the realization is not everyone has that continuous thought process, though, that voice in your head, not everyone has that. And I still have a hard time comprehending how people can exist without having that voice in their head. And do they experience life with like just emotional clouds of emotion or whatnot? Like, it's hard to comprehend, but maybe I need a little bit more empathy on that so I can better understand that. But
Drew, there's a book called The Untethered Soul. So
okay,
you should read that. And that will
Untethered
give you a
Soul.
little bit. Yeah, that'll give
Okay.
you a really good perspective on what it's like to also take the voice of emotions, because those voices, right? Like, it's like there's a good one and a bad one. So everything always has duality. There's
Right.
always a reason why you should and a reason why you shouldn't. But then who's the person listening to it? That's you.
Yeah.
So that's the you, right? So once you begin to kind of settle into the you, that there is no voice. It's just you.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't mean that your emotions aren't playing or that you can't find empathy or you're not moving through it. You're just less attached to the idea that there's going to be some reasoning voice in your mind putting it all together, putting the pieces together. But that, I think that's a little bit different than people who do not have a conscious, that like that little voice, right? That we kind of all grow up with. So, but it's a really good book, and it kind of delves into that basis of creating empathy of self, which is really good.
For me, it's just putting yourself in, like, taking a step back and just putting yourself in their position and trying to imagine how you would feel in their position. And that's, to me, is a good way of trying to create. If you're having a hard time doing it, maybe just step back and think, okay, well, if I was in their position, how would I feel? And that's how I teach my kids. So
yeah,
exactly. And again, with the voice, you have the good voice, the bad one, and then there's the other ones going 877 cash now. So there's times I wish there was a way that I could like give audio to the stream of consciousness that goes through my head, because that could be entertaining in itself. Like an ADHD creative mind is yeah.
I was also going to say conscious cannabis is a very amazing aspect of understanding the voices within yourself. So it's a meditative state with a high yield amount of very specific strains for yourself. But because it's almost like when people want to do like ketamine journeys or ayahuasca journeys and things like that, it's actually a very good practice with your own medical cannabis, where you sit and meditate with yourself and take yourself into a deep state of meditation. But because it's cannabis, you're actually still very conscious and hyper alert. And that's the difference between a psychedelic experience versus a cannabis experience. You can come to and actually capture that information for yourself so that you can revisit it again. So it's actually a really great tool that you can do and safely practice within yourself, sitting with your medicine and sitting with your emotions in a meditative state, and really actually digging deep. That's how, as a patient, I think you can begin to not only use your medicine deliberately as it is prescribed for your disease, but also use it in a way that creates intention and kind of adds a tool for integration for the trauma that kind of comes from being a medical patient.
Yeah.
Totally.
Zach was wanting to say something. Sorry, Zach.
Oh yeah, Zach, was your hand up?
Yeah,
and I know Tiffany, you had wanted to say something too a little bit ago. So
I'm going to zip it.
What I was just going to try to say, it's interesting how on the interstate or wherever we're at, people will endanger us or do something or trigger our emotions or do something that will get us on their energy level. And I think what psychedelics have really taught me is that I am in control of my emotions. Nobody else can dictate my happiness, sadness, or misery. And that ultimately I need to just take control of my situation. And if I need to get myself out of that situation or allow them to run amok and do whatever they're going to do, so be it. But just, I think psychedelics have taught me there's things that are within our control and there's things that we cannot control. And that's what I need to take my life by, like that there's, whether it's Proposition 2 or whether it was getting myself sober or whatever, there was just little things in my life that I just wasn't doing. And the psychedelics basically reawoken that inside of me. And that's what we all need.
Yeah. Thank you for getting right to pretty much to my next point. Tiffany, did you want some to?
I think I actually raised my hand quite a bit ago and then temporarily forgot what I was going to say, but it was actually just regarding the throttling, from 0 to 60. It was, you mentioned that, just you learn what you grow up with,
Yeah.
That was totally my house. And it caused a couple of things. One, like I can manage my emotions, manage them. And then all of a sudden it was like a nuclear bomb that went off. It was at 0 to 60. And the other thing that it taught me, and seeing that in my own house, is I kept my mouth shut all the time too. Because, like Valerie said earlier, that whoever was yelling the loudest was the winner. Well, in my house, it was whoever could say the most horrible things that just destroyed you down in your soul. And so, that's taken half a century for me to learn how to unlearn all those things that I grew up with. And sadly, I passed that on to my children. And so now they're trying to heal and I'm trying to heal. So anyhow, it's amazing that actually came back to me, because sometimes I tend to smoke a little much on these.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. Yes. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Here, let me pop back up
and I love that you mentioned and have the awareness and acknowledgement of I pass that on and I'm trying to move through that. And now I see how they are too. And so you're a beautiful conduit and lesson for what they can do. And that's really awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
I appreciate that. That is actually is still my journey. Part of my healing is to recognize the things that I passed on to my children. And so now, instead of being triggered when my kids express their emotions towards me, instead of getting triggered and getting on the defensive and lashing out at them, I can now take a step back. And with the help of cannabis and psychedelics, I can evaluate myself and say and do almost the opposite of what I had learned my whole life. And so I feel like I've been able to, while all of us are healing, I've been able to connect with my children a little better because of just all the things that we're talking about today, just recognizing all the emotions. So anyhow.
No, thank you for sharing that.
And neuroplasticity change. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's once you're able to identify it, that's when you're able to start addressing it. And so kind of just wrapping up everything we've been talking about, we have these emotion feeling wheels to help us give name to what we're feeling, to expand it beyond the 5 general emotions that we all know, you know. And then once you're able to give it that name, you're able and just sit with it, you can usually get to the root of the trigger, you know. So for example, you know, if I'm having an anxiety, I'll use one, TikTok. You know, a lot of people, oh, you should start a TikTok. Yeah, I would love to, but you know what I don't want to love is having all of those negative comments, everyone judging me for being 30 pounds overweight, having a higher hairline than I did when I was in my 20s, or you don't agree with what I say, so I'm a horrible person and I deserve to die horrible. I don't want any of that. And so, you know, I sit with, you know, when someone says, do you want to do a TikTok? You know, all of a sudden I have this fear. Why am I fear? Why am I feeling this fear and this it's a vulnerability. I'm feeling vulnerable. Oh, it's judgment. Okay, so what this is judgment. And you know, I'm able to, oh, so the thing that's holding me back from going on TikTok, and again, this is just a stupid little thing, TikTok, it's social media, it's not really that big, but it's a good example. The thing that's holding me back is a vulnerability of judgment. Why am I afraid of being judged? Is it reasonable? Is this a reasonable emotional response, or is this an unreasonable response? Well, in the realms of TikTok, it's a very reasonable response. This is rational. This makes sense. You know, well, if I do this, what will you know, if I choose to do it or if I choose to not, you know, do the pros and cons. You know, I was talking to one of my good friends. He is a cannabis user, but he just thinks differently than me. You know, but I was asking him, like, when you go into a situation, like you're going to give a presentation or ask a business for something, like, do you like game plan your conversation? He's like, no, I just do it. Like that. What? I can't comprehend. Like, I cannot have, for the last 2 days, I've been game planning this conversation. Like, I cannot go into a conversation without, like, at least, okay, if A equals to B, then goes to C, you know, it's like a choose your own adventure. Okay, well, if they choose B instead of A, you know, how will that like, I game plan every conversation I have. Like, when someone, that's why I prefer text messages, because it allows you the opportunity to, like, every type scenario, this response, oh, that might get that response, maybe that could try, you know. And this process, these are social emotional learning skills that you learn, because, you know, there was a time where, you know, everyone just shoots from her hip and it's like, oh, that got me into trouble. Well, I don't like being in trouble, so what can I do to make sure that I don't get in trouble? Okay, maybe I should game plan what I do before I do it. Okay, blah blah blah. Yeah, the risk of getting in trouble is lower now because I'm going to do this instead of just that. You know, these are social emotional learning skills, and again, it goes with the emotions, being able to identify it. You know, oh, I don't want to do TikTok because of judgment, but it's a rational judgment. It makes sense. And, you know, do I want to be in the public light? No, that's not what I want in my life. So guess what? I made the choice based on rational and emotionally balanced response. That's not just like well, screw it. Well, why did you screw it? You never did all the work to figure out, was this a rational response or an irrational response? And again, getting to the root of emotional responses, when you are in a triggered state, you're in an irrational state of mind. You know, and I think politically, this is why a lot of people like to use culture war things, or items that really get people worked up, that they're really passionate about. Oh, that's making me so mad. Because when you're so mad, do you know what you're not doing? You're not thinking through the rational steps of, why am I mad? Is this a rational response to being mad? Am I being manipulated to be mad so this person can get me to do something that I may not do in a normal rational state? You know, these are emotional intelligence things that you're like, oh, okay, I'm in a triggered state. I'm going to go through the steps. I'm first going to breathe. I'm going to find my grounding. I'm going to look at these emotions. What is this emotion? Oh, this is fear. Okay, fear of what? Of you know, and again, trace it back. And while you're doing this, what you also have realized is you're meditating. You've gotten control of your breath. You're allowing your sympathetic nervous system to go stand down while you're finding your grounding, and you're back in a rational state of mind. And that is such an important concept that I think gets lost on people, being in a rational state and being in a rational state. And when you're triggered, you're not thinking properly. You're not thinking straight. So yeah, these are coping strategies for managing emotional responses.
It's like having a teenager.
And the role of medical
who-
cannabis is in supporting emotional well-being, helping
Right.
patients cope with co-conditions, and tips for responsible and effective use of medical cannabis in conjunction with social emotional learning skills. And the conclusion, just sit with it.
Like I was saying, it's like having a teenager, when you're, I don't know if anybody here, I know that you're Tiffany, that you're, but it's that feeling that you get inside that you have to control emotions as a parent when your teenager's being just mean, or says things that are hurtful, or, kids will be kids. And when they're young, they don't think before they say, or they're just not at that point in their, how the development works. But, I've learned that a lot as a parent, is like how to control my emotions when they say something really hurtful and they don't realize that it's being hurtful. Like the other day, my son, Mom, okay, so like there's almost the women in the world, and he's 7. Okay. He's just a little tiny, he's adorable. Right. And he's learning how to say mean things because he's around other kids since the pandemic. So, he says, Mom, most of the girls in the world, almost all of the girls in the world, they're 100% beautiful. And I'm like, okay, all right. And he said, but Mom, you're 101% beautiful. And he's like, I'm not really big on the extra 1%, Mom. And he's 7. And I'm like, what the heck did I do? But he was trying to express his emotion, but he didn't know exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
And then it like triggered me. So I'm in the front seat driving going, okay, how do I handle this? Breath work. Okay. We're good. It's okay, son. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you get those feelings as a parent where you're just like, you want to just get so mad because they can be really mean, but then you have to control your emotions. And that's what popped into my head when it was like trying to think about those moments where you feel like you want to go 0 to 100,
Yeah.
Those are some big moments being a parent. I'll tell you what, I think those are the biggest I've ever had in my life being a parent. That's when they happen, is that when you're a parent, big time. Because you have to learn
expanding.
Yeah.
Expanding that too, Alicia, is like, I think for all of us, right, we walk through the world already having our own assumptions and experiencing that we are applying outwardly, and are like that Drew said, being aware of how you may be being manipulated into responding in a way. That's also us experiencing the world in a way that creates that feeling of needing to respond in that way, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the unlearning of being human. Triggers are just a part of our emotional world. It's a part of how we actually create safety for ourselves. So again, there's a book called Interfamily Systems by Dr. Richard Schwartz, and that actually talks about the different pieces and parts of ourselves that, like teenagers, a lot of us get stuck in our emotional world in certain places, and getting a better understanding of where you might be stuck or where your emotions may have gotten stuck based on trauma or based on a diagnosis, or even we exacerbate, or our emotions get exacerbated by the way we eat, by whether we're exercising or not, how we're sleeping. So we all get caught in these cycles, where we may not be doing those things. A lot of us after the pandemic, myself included, I'm back in trying to understand my own healthcare and how I show up for myself and how I integrate and do these pieces and parts that affect my parts, right? So I think leaning into knowing that it's okay to not be okay is the best thing that we can all do for our own emotional world, but to also speak when you're not okay so that you can begin to find tools and find help to be okay. And that's really, as TRUCE, and Drew, I'm so happy you did this particular one and you invited us all here to kind of talk about emotions and touch on that and be vulnerable with where we're at. I think that's kind of what we hope to kind of cultivate and create more room for, is the ability for us all to say when we're not okay and have a community of people show up, so that we can be. So, you know, it's a hard plug, to live in a world where emotions are not always welcome in every space that you go into.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we're all regulating is, am I safe to feel in this space? Or do I care about whether I'm safe to feel in this space? And am I going to regulate or modulate off of everyone else around me? Or am I cultivating space within myself to be okay no matter where I go?
Yeah.
You know, so it's definitely like, yes, we're all teenagers in some way, Alicia. I think we can't help it. It's
Teenagers are,
culturally just how we were designed.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all human, you know, we've just gotten older, but we're all who we are, and we've been this way our whole lives. You know what I mean? And we've learned and lost and hurt, and you know, there's a lot of things that have happened to all of us, but we're still the person we were when we were little.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind, you know. So when you say that we're all teenagers, yeah, technically we are, but we can't let our teenagers know that. You know?
Exactly. Well, and with all of that, you know, with what you were saying, Val, in recognizing that you're not okay, and also being that it's okay to not be okay. And in that reaching, I have a hard time reaching out for help. I'm one of those people. I will be there for anybody except myself. And I think a lot of us are that way. And, you know, I think that's something that we should probably all sit with, wondering why. Because, you know, I don't know, probably does have to do with self-love. But all in conclusion, all of it, these social emotional learning skills, they're really important. They're really helpful. They're tools that are paradigm shattering once you get a grasp on how to implement them and integrate them into your normal therapeutic practice as well as your cannabis practice. You know, I don't consume cannabis unless I'm consciously consuming it as one medicine, but also, you know, knowing I'm taking a psychedelic substance that is going to have these dissociative properties. And when I'm going to be taking this medicine, I'm going to take advantage of every opportunity to work some shit out so that when I'm better. Again, it's medicinal, and that's the whole being able to use these tools to enhance your therapeutic results. It's again, it's paradigm shattering, and I don't know if that's
Drew, can I
to say.
add
Yeah,
too that
go ahead.
like I think this is really awesome to kind of ground into having more emotional awareness for yourself.
Yeah.
I think that with cannabis use, your emotionality can be shifted, can change. When you are not in a good space, you can be overusing, that can also create a detriment in your emotional and mental health. That can affect your mental health. And so, you know I'm probably the like clinical person in the crew right now, you know, where I kind of go on that side of things, where I do think that we need to be conscious of how, as patients, we can become dependent in ways, but then with the emotionality that comes with these types of medicines, and like you said, the dissociation that can come from it. Um, that can really how uh-oh.
Are you guys losing her as well? Okay. Val, I think your signal's dropping out a little bit.
I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, you're cutting out. Darn it. I was so on top of what you were saying.
And
Um,
computers cutting out, but yeah, that can impact how you experience your use. And we always want to be conscious of what that is and how we can do better for ourselves. So that's also a message to
I feel like I was back on the LimeWire days where you were slowing down. It's like one word was like this, and then really fast. Anyways, and I think we're still having we're still having bandwidth issues. We love you, Val. So yeah, I'm good. I'm just gonna wrap it up because we're definitely blown over the hour here. We've been able to cover so much in this conversation. And there's it's such a complex topic. We'll be talking about this more. And I think this is the going forward, especially with these Zoom sessions, I think we want to be more educational and be talking about these types of topics, and a little less of the angsty, let's go to battle with this and all that, the legislature and this and that. Again, that's not a healthy emotional state either. We need to
Agreed.
we need to let our sympathetic nervous systems go down, and
Yes.
and with that, also recognizing as advocates, the major victory of what we've already achieved. Medical cannabis is legalized already in Utah. We passed it. They said it was going to take 15 to 20 years. We did it in 4. And now we're into the 3rd year of a program. There's tons of things that still need to be fixed. And that's going to be fixed, but I don't think that should be our full attention, because it's exhausting. That being able to recognize it in 2 sections, we won, we had the victory. And now there's the maintenance that's going to just be forever. And being able to separate those two and accept the win and be able to let the maintenance take place and not have to feel the responsibility to watch every single microscopic inch of that maintenance, because it's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting. It's not sustainable. I've been doing this for 10 years. I didn't think it was going to be a decade-long journey. I thought it was going to be a couple years. Let's get it passed and we'll be done. Yay, victory. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think we're gonna focus. I like the feel of the focus of these. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
I do too. I do. I like that idea.
It's more sustainable.
If something serious or really, really important comes up in the program, or something crazy happens with a patient, or, something really important comes up, like serious news, then of course we cover that topic, but we should always try to keep it happy. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to say the word stoner. I mean, and when you say stoner, it's kind of so let's just try to keep things upbeat and positive, and create an environment for people that need that,
Yeah.
And they need to be informed, but they also want to be in a happy place.
Exactly. And as a community, these sharing our tools, these are tools like I got from the VA that I'm now sharing with you guys. Guess what? You got 8 years of therapy, packaged in a 50-minute Zoom sesh, and the next one will have the next, other people share what works for them. And, that's almost community building is what I'm looking forward to, and growing with all of you as a community, and helping each other along. I find joy in that. Like I breathe easy in that. Like when I'm thinking of like just constantly being in opposition to the Utah legislature, like, there's so much anxiety and stress just thinking of like, am I going to be doing this for 10 years, 15, 20, 30, 90? Like that just does not feel light to me.
I know we're over, but that was one of the things when Christine reached out to me, I actually had to take a step back, and she asked me too, because obviously she was feeling the emotional just destruction that happened with everything. And of course, those of you guys who are closer to it than I was, it's even more detrimental to you. And I really had to think about whether or not I was going to start talking about this stuff again. It's like, and I still kind of step back.
Yeah.
I step back, and I just have to be fully aware, because, so in other words, I'm all for going in more of an educational, let's talk about some good serious topics like the cannabis hypermesis last time, and this. Now keep it cannabis, but keep us learning in like this great community where we're helping each other out too.
Yeah.
So
thank you. Yeah, I'm glad we're all in unity on this topic, because I've been really trying to figure out the most sustainable and healthy way going forward, and so I'm excited about that. This future feels light. It feels good. So
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So with that, thank you everybody for joining us. Oh, let me turn up the music. But thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, thank you. What a great
Thanks, Drew.
Zoom. I'm gonna go out back and watch it.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Alicia.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Drew.
everyone.
Beautiful job. Thanks for getting us to talk about this.